Welcome to Corinne's Picks. I'm your host for this episode, Jessica Kwong, and on this show we talk to brilliant artists about their work and how they've created it. Today I have a very spectacular photographer with me. His name is Robert Curtis. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you've done a lot of photography, and I just wanted to know a little bit about your background on how you got into this and what your vision is when you do these shots.
Well, I started, I took my first photo class. I was not a great student in high school. I grew up in Virginia in a rural area. I went to Charlottesville to go to community college, and I took a photo class. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I took a lot of everything, a lot of history. And then from there, I went to VCU. And then I picked up a job. I borrowed a camera for the class. My granddad said he wasn't going to buy me a camera because he didn't know if it was just a whim. So I went to the local photographer. I thought, this is crazy. He's never going to lend me a camera. He did. And then I did the class, and then I worked for him for a while. And then I went to VCU, and then I went to Baltimore, Maryland Institute College of Art. And that's where I really got into the photography. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been a freelancer ever since.
That's great.
Yeah.
I know that there's so many things that have changed since you started your career, I'm sure, until now.
Yeah.
It's always great to have that big camera, the professional one, but some people use their iPhones now. I understand you also have used your phone to make some photos yourself, right?
Yes, I do. Most of the time I use a professional camera. I actually started out, because of the person I worked with, I started out with what they call a 2 1/4 lens camera, 2 1/4 frame, which is a big negative, and I loved it because I did a lot of black and white, but I spent a lot of time in the dark rooms, and I used to print for other people too because I was a fairly decent printer. But I really liked, and I kind of let that go for a while and got more into video work, and then when everything changed to digital, I revisited photography, and I love sitting out in the light on a computer screen, doing the editing. And I spent enough time in the dark room. Yeah, I do most of my work with the professional camera, but I don't let that stop. When I see something, and I have my phone, which is always all the time,
right.
I take it out and I take the shot. So, and then I deal with it in post however I want. It's more of like you take the shot, you get the raw material, and then you kind of see what you can do with it.
I know so much of it is editing, but also because I like taking photos myself, it's the lighting. You have to have a good original to start with, or else you don't have much to work with after.
Right, and these phones are, the technology with the phones is amazing. I shoot everything on my Canon, and I have a Canon and a Sony camera. I shoot that on a huge RAW file, so there's a lot of flexibility there. It's like taking a super duper negative in the old days. So, but sometimes I'll shoot with my professional camera and I'll take it into my phone because there's particular apps on the phone that I like the quality it gives me. So I was very much in tune very early on to one of my photography teachers at Maryland Institute. They call it MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art. His name is Richard Castell. And I agreed with him right off the bat when he said, photography is theater. It's another form of theater. You can take a photograph and you get something very realistic, but you're setting a stage, and it's very theatrical. You know, it's not reality. It's a shoot off from reality. So I've always seen it that way. So when I do portraits, my first thought is the stage. It's not the original content, because that's easy to light.
So you need to have a great setup.
I want the setup is what I spend a lot of time on, because that informs the mood and what's going on. Once I get the person on the whatever I've decided, then it's just working with the person one-on-one and just kind of following your gut. You're not really thinking all the time. You're just kind of responding.
That's very
so
interesting.
Even when I do still lifes, I kind of see it as a portrait, because I'm singling that person or thing out and trying to see what it's communicating to me.
Well, I've looked at various of your images, so let's get into the first one.
Sure.
There was a dozen that I really stood out to me.
Thanks,
so
thanks.
the very first one that popped out to me was the one with is it a cow, and it had dry rune on it. So I noticed your other images, some of them have people working, so I don't know if this cow is working or what's going on here.
Well, it did work. I don't know why it was just sitting there. I don't know how long that was, but I did a series because was doing a lot of black and white, and I have always liked cows, those black and white Holstein cows. Those are milk cows, and this was in northern Baltimore, and I just went around. I would kind of create a series for myself, and then I would keep revisiting. And I saw this. Most of them were out in the field, and I just went around and take these photographs. And this one was in the barn and it said dry, and it was like obviously for whatever reason it was not able to produce milk. So I don't know what the future of that cow was, but I just loved the light on it, and I just thought, well, this is not something I see every day.
It's definitely not something I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So.
They probably still do the same thing now, as far as I know. That's just to let you know that this is not a working cow.
Okay, well now I learned something today.
Yeah.
Let's get on to your next image, your second image. This one I thought very interesting. Which transit system is this on?
This is Metro North, because
Okay.
I live in Westchester, and this is a perfect example of, I didn't have my regular camera, but I saw him coming up the aisle, and I wrote a little bit about it. I put this one on my Instagram account, and I wrote about it, and I kind of wrote, I said, I saw him coming in all his ritualistic splendor, because he was just taking care of people. And I actually thought too at the time that this guy's going to be replaced one day, you know, by a robot or whatever. And I just like, he's just full of everything. You know, he's I mean, if there's an emergency, he's all there. And he's warm and he's friendly, and I hate to see that kind of thing go away, but I was lucky to get this shot, and I've shot a few things. I like to shoot people taking a nap.
Okay.
I haven't
I don't
shown
think I
any
saw
of
any of those,
Yeah,
but
no, I haven't put any of those in there.
love to talk about your third image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now this is something that I've kind of rediscovered. It's a series that I did at the New Jersey Turnpike rest area, at the Grover Cleveland rest area.
Okay.
And I shot this series. I came up with about 12 shots over and all, and I shot this over a series of 7 or 8 months. And I had a very small, this is before the phones, I had a very small point and shoot Minolta camera, because I didn't want people to know I was photographing them. And it was just it was a point and shoot. And I developed a kind of a method how I wanted these to look. And so that's why you keep going back. So the shots you get that you like, oh, this informs me to what I want to do the next time. So I was really walking around, and I only got caught by one person one time, and he really got upset with me. And I apologized, and I said, listen, can send you the photograph. But he was like, but everything's in transit here. So everybody was moving fast. But it was some of the workers, too, that I really enjoyed.
I really like about this photos of the squares. There's like squares on the ground, the checkers, and then there's squares on the, seems like what he's wiping.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great sort of in the moment shot.
Yeah,
and you would not
this has always been one of my favorites, because it seemed to be taken just at the right time, and the light coming from behind him. It has a kind of a
nice
glow.
mood.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And let's talk about your next photo as well. I really like that one too. That's something you usually, you know, how you caught this one. It might be a funny story, right?
I was actually in a stall, and I just put my camera up, because I got pretty good at pointing that camera.
Did you have the doors closed?
Yeah,
at
the door was
stall?
closed. I knew it was coming. That's the thing. You can, if you really sit and take your time and watch, you can see things develop. And it's kind of like writing. You know, you're a journalist.
I am, yeah.
You write a first draft, and then you say, well, that's not quite, but you can see things develop, and you go for it.
It's a process,
It's a process, and the same thing with this. And so I just held it over my head and clicked it, and it captured them right between those two urinals, and it worked out great. It was a lucky shot.
Yeah, I think that with photography, you have to be very patient. You have to wait
Yeah.
a long time. That's one thing that not everyone may understand.
Yeah.
But that's very
This
interesting.
is, this is the tools of the trade. There's his little broom, so.
And the next image is a bit interesting. It seems like, to me, it looks like it had some editing, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I do a lot of still lives, and I do a lot of flowers. And to me, they're portraits. I see something that's just of interest, a rock or a flower or a stone or a leaf, and I will put it on a piece of parchment paper and just photograph it. And often I take, this one I definitely took into my phone because there's some apps there that really work nicely.
Can you share some secrets about what these apps are?
Well,
Are they
there's-
Lightroom or?
Well, that's
Okay.
that's on my computer,
Okay.
Lightroom and Photoshop and Bridge and all that. These, I bring them into my phone and I just start playing. And
On the settings of the camera.
in my phone, and
Yeah.
then I output them, I email them to me, and then sometimes there's not quite the right color. I will put it in the Photoshop and change the color a little bit. But this, I've always loved the mood of this one. I just picked this up at the beach, I think, one time.
Oh, wow.
So the two apps. So if I want to give a little secret away, the two apps that I usually use is Camera Plus. It's called Camera Plus Tap Tap Tap. Now I still think I have the old version. I'm a creature of habit. The other one is Snapseed.
I use Snapseed as well. I
Yeah,
think it's very
but
good.
I use that secondly. I always take it into Camera Plus Tap Tap, and because it darkens it. I like to darken it to see what's there. And then sometimes I'll go through a process and I'm like, it's not interested. I'm not interested in it. So I'll put it away and then maybe come back to it later and I'll go down another avenue. But I'm just waiting for it to talk to me, and then I get closer and closer. So that's the process for me.
Well, I learned a little trade secret today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it takes time too, because sometimes you get frustrated and you're like, this is pretty crappy right now. But
And sometimes you have looked at it for too long and you have
Yes.
just ruined it, so you have to start over again.
Yeah.
I've done that before.
that's big. I do that a lot with portraits. I look at I don't really know what's a good portrait until maybe 3 or 4 months afterwards, because you've got a lot of shots. That's the other thing when you're doing digital, you shoot way too much.
I know. If I didn't have the capacity of the iPhone that I have right now with as much storage as it
Right.
has, I don't know how it would
Yeah.
function.
When I had a Hasselblad, some of those shots will come up. I had a Hasselblad, and I would only shoot like 24 images. And you're not looking in the back of your camera. You're just really looking through you never take your eyes off the subject. Digital, it's distracting. You tend to want to look in your camera a lot, and
Yeah.
it kind of breaks the mood a little bit. So,
Let's take a look at another photo because you've got so many. So this one with the tree, I wasn't really sure what was in the background and how much of it was edited, and it just
well,
was striking.
I brought this one. I actually, because I was taking a hike, and I saw this, and that's a chemtrail, of like a jet.
Oh,
and
okay,
I
that's
just-
what I thought it might be.
And the tree is like a birch tree. It's kind of white, and the light was hitting it. It was making it glow. So again, I brought it and started playing with it just to see what I could do with it, because sometimes you have a sense of drama when you're there, and you just want to push it. Some of these things I push really hard. Some I just kind of keep them as they are. It depends on what I think looks best. Again, it's theater, and these things tend to look good on a wall.
Right. I think a lot of people like nature shots in their homes. It's relaxing and
Yeah,
it's great. So
absolutely.
we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back to speak more with Robert Curtis about his photography. Welcome back to Corinne's Picks. I'm your host for this episode, Jessica Kwong, and we've been speaking to a brilliant photographer. His name is Robert Curtis. Thanks so much again for joining us, Robert.
Thanks for having me. I like that word, brilliant.
Photos are brilliant
It is,
compared to the work that I've been doing. So,
That's cool.
well, we've been speaking about your work, and let's go on to the next image. I know that we've got about a dozen that I picked out,
Right.
and a couple of the ones that I thought were great were the nature ones, and this is another one of a tree, and it looks like there's a moon peeking out from the back. That's really striking.
I was surprised. This one is like fairly typical kind of silhouette and everything, but it turned out well. I was in Scarborough, New York. There's a little place there next to the Hudson River that I go to a lot, just to kind of watch the sunsets and stuff. But this moon was flying up, and I know several people really it's a sense of serenity they really like. So I was like, okay, who am I to argue? So I sent that. I have an artist rep who's been very good, and she's like, this is one of her favorites. So I was like, okay, I'll send it.
Great. And the next photo, let's speak about that one. This one I really thought, I wasn't quite sure. I know it's an original photo, but I was just sort of shocked at how the editing process went, because it's created or transformed into something much more than just a raw photo to me.
Well, this is a good example of me just really playing and pushing. So this is, actually I shot this at Rockefeller Preserve up in Westchester, and I call it a self-portrait, but I like the fact that I started
Of yourself?
Of myself, and those are my shoes. You know, I'm shooting down into water. And I started to realize that those stones in the bottom started to look like stars to me, and I just started pushing it. The color may be a little intense. It looks very intense here.
It is very intense.
And sometimes I mute that down a little bit. Depends on like the print. That's the interesting thing too. When you
the printer does change things.
The print changes things, and I like the luminosity, but sometimes the colors can be too intense, so I have to like shade it down. So the translation between the digital to the print, you gotta, watch that. But that was one that was a lot of fun to play around with. So it was, I just called it a self-portrait.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if people can do that sort of editing on their phone, or is that one that you did more on?
I did a lot of that
Photoshop?
on my phone.
Okay.
I did. I kind of made it darker. Sometimes I bring it into my phone and do that, and then send it back out. And then, and I usually adjust the color, though. It's sometimes hard to get the color you want. I will do that in Photoshop. But these are just tools, and I'm kind of a creature of habit. And lately I've been doing things where I isolate things, because there might be like when I do the flowers a lot, sometimes the center's a little dark, and I want to bring that out. So it's easy to do that type of thing. So it's just a creative process, and the fact that I see it as theater, I just feel like I'm the director. Okay, it's like you're saying your lines this way, but I need you to say it this way.
So you actually, do you sometimes wait for the subject to do something or do you tell the subject to do something, or do you
In portraits?
wait?
In portraits?
In portraits, you direct. That's good.
I direct, but I try to be very minimal, because it's interesting. Particularly, I direct. I let them, like if I was going to do a portrait sitting to you, the fact that you might be uncomfortable is okay with me, because it might show me a vulnerable side. But then you might do something, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then I might direct just a little bit. Like, you might be sitting a certain way, and then I may have you do something a little differently, just to, and you will translate that yourself. So I don't do a lot of directing when I do that. I like to kind of see what they do.
Okay. Let's see some of your portraits and move on to the next photo. This one I thought was, especially with the frame, it just seems like there's definitely a creative vision behind that one.
This kid, thank you. I was photographing him in the pool. He's a son of a friend of mine, and I have some other close-ups of him. And he, but they were very funny. He was kind of enjoying being, and I was getting in close, which I don't always do. And he was just having a good time. And I just loved his eyes in this. I mean, his eyes, he's just...
They match the pool.
He's
the
a pretty
water.
intense kid, too. So that's when I thought it felt like a good portrait of him.
All All right, let's
Yeah.
see the few other photos that we have left that I
Thanks.
picked out. This one, I don't know really what's going on in the background, but it seems very, very like thought-provoking.
Well, this was one of my first. This is a pivotal shot for me because when I did this, I got a lot of great feedback on it, and it really got me doing more and more portraits. And this was done at the time with a Hasselblad. No, actually with my 2 1/4 camera. It doesn't make any difference, but a square format. And ever since, I've always liked the square format, particularly with portraits. But this was a teacher of mine, and his name Kinter, and he showed this film called Blood of the Poet, Jean Cocteau, and I said, stand in front of you couldn't stop the film, it had to keep running. And I told him to stand in front of it, and I had to wait until something on the film came up that put him in light, because I couldn't see him at all at a certain place, and I just said, look at me here, and he has a very dignified air about him.
He does.
And it just worked out. I was lucky. I think I took only like 12 shots, and I would never dream of doing that with my digital camera. So, but I was lucky on that one.
Well, there's 2 more of your shots left, and
Right.
I thought they were both a little bit similar because they both had somebody pointing at their own face. So
Oh, right.
We'll take a look at the first one too. The first one first. This one, I really like the colors, and it really blends in with the background. There's really something about it.
This was one of my portraits I did with my first digital camera, which was kind of a low quality Nikon. And this is somebody that I know very well. And she was on her deathbed.
Oh my gosh.
And there's another photograph, I don't think I included it. There's 2 shots that kind of go together. This was one of the first times where I was like, I gotta get something for posterity.
I mean, it's a powerful
And I
image.
was really in her face. And I felt bad about it, but I just had to get it because I knew it was going to be the last time I saw her. And so she would kind of go in and out of consciousness, and then she would kind of look at me. There's 2 sides to her. The other side is a much softer side, but she could be a tough person. So this one, sometimes she'd look at me like, what are you doing? And then other times she was like, she wanted to make sure she looked nice, but she was kind of half asleep. Because she was somewhat vain, like we all are when there's a camera around.
Right.
So this one worked out, and I did a little bit of post work. I kind of opened up the whites and made them a little more fluffy. So it just turned out, and I was very pleased. I took 100 shots, and the ones that I used, 99 shots, and I felt like a jerk taking this photograph because I was
worked out great,
I mean,
though.
I was
Yeah.
literally right here.
Yeah.
So
It's a one that
and
I
then
think
the last
everyone
two,
wants to have.
the last 2 shots were the ones that came out.
All right, and let's go to your very last image, which is also something that makes you think.
Yeah, this is a celebrity chef, and I was doing a kind of a commercial job for her, but she just looked so vulnerable. I don't even think she's seen this. I should send it to
Really?
her.
Wow.
Yeah, but just something about it. Very nice person, and those eyes again. It's all about the eyes, and the way she was looking at it. I just said, this is I felt like a strong photograph,
Yeah,
and
it's
there's a
framed very well.
vulnerability to it that I really like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I also like the framing with the hair and the colors, even though it's black and white. It's
Yeah.
very well shot and edited.
Yeah, I was trying to get this in color, but it wasn't getting it right. So I said, let's just go to black and white. I'll do the color later.
Now people are so into photography, especially with Instagram, and they take their own photos, and they have, what do you think is the value of a professional photographer like yourself? Why are you still important when people are just taking their own photos, having their friends take their photos, editing their own photos?
Well,
Just wondering.
it's an interesting question because now AI is really starting to change what I do because I do a lot of
That's
corporate
another layer.
work. So they can. That's something that I haven't. I know I'm going to be late to the party on that because I'm just not that technical, but I will start diving into that. But particularly when you want to do a story, like when I follow people around, like my New Jersey Turnpike series, I particularly editorial. There's art photographers, and a lot of the art photographers still use the old methods, the analog, which I understand because there's a quality you can get. But they're taking their time and they're doing something a little different, snapping away. And I have some people think it's a little narrow, but I have a different definition of a candid shot versus a portrait.
Okay. Right.
And when I taught, I do that. So I think people can, when you look at your photographs, and if you want to be a photographer, you can step it up. But there's photographers that just use their phone, and they do some really interesting work. So it's just a tool.
It's more about your talent, your vision, and
Yeah.
Your vision for a picture, I think, is very important. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What do you want to say? And I like to work in series. Like you kind of keep focusing. Like you just just follow your interest, and see what can come of it. I have some ideas that I want to do, some projects I'd like to do in the portrait realm. Like I'd like to photograph grandparents, or I would like to photograph people that were raised by the grandparents, like myself and my younger sister. But I want to do it in a different way than the usual, like the guy's holding up a picture of his grandparents. Something a little more creative, a little more personal, a little more compelling. So that I haven't figured that out. But the only way you really figure it out is you just keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's in photography.
And there's also not an end to subjects, so I'm looking forward to seeing your work in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of it.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show, Robert. It was fabulous to learn about your photography and feel like I can improve my own just from speaking with you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Corinne's Picks. We enjoyed speaking with Robert, and we'll be back for another episode very soon.